the presentation towards this. Now bear with me for a second while I select the poll. Okay, you should see it on screen now. I'll give you 30 seconds to answer the poll, and then I'll share the results with you. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay, it looks like most of you have voted now. Let me share the results. And as you can see here, most people are using a custom master page, but the other options are quite popular as well, including not doing any kind of customization, which is fine for smaller environments and even large environments. Okay, so let's get started with a quick overview of the SharePoint Infuser tool that we have. So from a very high level perspective, it's a very simple product that allows any content to be added automatically to every page in a site collection. Now why would you want to do this? Well, by adding small pieces of HTML or JavaScript or style sheets to a page, you can make changes to SharePoint's user interface, remove parts that you don't find necessary or maybe are confusing to your audience, or make things just work a little bit better. And I'll demonstrate each of these options in more detail later, but some of the more popular uses of the Infuser are scripts to fix some shortcomings in the SharePoint wiki, add autocomplete to the search box, create some floating menus. The possibilities literally are endless, and I'll show you in more detail in a second. And if you're a developer, a SharePoint developer, then you may be worrying about how the pages in your SharePoint site are updated by the Infuser. Well, rest assured that the Infuser does not actually modify the source of the pages. So any changes are merged in at runtime without causing any side effects, such as ghosting or shadowing, if that's something that you're concerned with. One of the other benefits is that once the Infuser has been installed, you don't need access to the server anymore to make any modifications. You can do everything via the Infuser user interface, which is run inside a web browser inside SharePoint. Oh, and in case I didn't mention it, it's completely free to download and use. There's no strings attached. Just download it and play around with it. So this is what it looks like. Very simple, but it works very well, and it even provides some syntax highlighting for whatever you type in. So if it's CSS or HTML or JavaScript, it's all highlighted properly. So let's get started with the first demo, and I'll quickly show what's possible without going into too much detail about what is exactly in the code. Otherwise, we'll be here for hours. And if you want to know more, then have a look at the related blog postings on our site, or just drop me a line and I'll point you in the right direction. And in the first demo, we'll show how to hide some unnecessary elements in the SharePoint user interface. Okay, so some of the things you see in every standard SharePoint user interface that, in my experience, end users sometimes complain about is, for example, this search drop-down menu with one option in most cases. Well, if there's one option, it should be enabled by default and it shouldn't even be visible. Another thing for end users that can be quite confusing is this view all site content link. Sometimes you don't want even to show this to your customers. So let's create a very simple script to just remove these two things using the SharePoint Infuser. So I've created a small script earlier. There's not much into it. I'll show the details in a second. And let's go to the Infuser page. So this is the standard page, and whatever we enter here will automatically be added to every site in this site collection. So whatever you do here only works on the site collection basis. If you want to have it on every site collection in your farm, then you will need to repeat this. But we found that our customers usually have a single site collection to be the unit of administration in SharePoint. So let's paste the changes in. So every time a page is now shown inside SharePoint, it will put this little bit of style sheet data in it. And what we do is we hide 3 different styles or elements. This is used by the quick launch, and the other 2 are used as well. One is actually used by WSS3, and the other one is a search box that's used by Microsoft Office SharePoint Server. So let's save this, and let's go back to the site. And what you'll see now is that the drop-down menu is gone, and so is the link that was over here. And it's not just on the home page. Whatever page you go to, it's automatically hidden from view. So that's just a very simple example of what you can do. Now, in the next demo, I'll show you how to fix some annoyances that are part of the standard SharePoint Wiki interface, specifically the lack of a home button and the fact that the breadcrumb navigation navigates to the wrong page. So let's have a look at the standard wiki. I just created one here earlier. It's just out of the box wiki library. And the thing is, if you look at this, how can you go back to the home page? There's no home button here. And if you think, oh, let's click on the wiki name here, maybe that will bring me back to the home page. No, it shows you a list of all the individual pages in your wiki, but it doesn't actually bring you back to the home page unless you actually go and look in the page and click the home button. It's very simple, but let's fix this. And again, using the Infuser. And we'll replace the scripts that we currently have in here with our fix the wiki script. And this script, and actually all the demos that I'm showing now, they're all available on our website. And I'll make sure that the links are posted again at the end of this presentation. So this, as you can see, the script is a little bit more complex, and it uses the ultimate web development tool for SharePoint, which is jQuery, which provides a very simple object model to make changes using JavaScript to basically anything that goes on in your page. So if we save this script and go back to the wiki, you can now see that we have a new home button, which actually works no matter where you are in your wiki, so it's very easy to go back. But also we have modified this link, which is in the breadcrumb. This is the same link that previously brought you back to the list of all the individual pages that are quite useless to the end user. So if I click this now, it links you back to the home page of the wiki as well. So that just makes it all work a little bit better. It's the wiki that comes with SharePoint. It's not too bad, but just these little small things make it very difficult to use for some people. Now, next demo, let's make the search box in SharePoint a little bit more interesting, because any modern website you go to, when you start typing in a search box, for example, you want to search for a license agreement, it would actually then show you a drop-down menu with already the options it has found. However, the one that ships with SharePoint is a bit stuck in the 20th century. Most modern applications wouldn't actually use a simple search like this anymore. So let's add some autocomplete to it. Again, let's go to the Infuser screen. And let's replace the scripts that we currently have in there for fixing the wiki. And let's add the search one. Now this is quite a complex script to actually put in. It's probably as complex as it And what it does, it uses again jQuery to make changes to the SharePoint page, but also it adds some CSS style sheets, and actually it invokes SharePoint, the SharePoint search web service from within jQuery, which allows you to call web services. So let's save this again and navigate to the main user interface of SharePoint. So now if we actually want to do some searching, let's say I now have a document somewhere which is the license agreement. I really want to have quick access to that. So let's start typing. So the moment you already have type in license, it will start searching, and it has found these results. And if I actually type in agreement after that, it will narrow it down to even less. So that's a much more modern experience to the SharePoint search. And the way we have made it look here is very basic. And there are some, if you look at the comments section in the blog post that we have about this autocomplete, there are some links from people who have even customized it further to do a custom people search. And when they start typing in a user's name here, you see that even the images, the photos show up, the telephone numbers. So this is really a very simple but powerful example of what you can do and how you can enhance the SharePoint user interface with this. And again, it's not just on the home page. You have automatically the search box is enhanced on every page in the site collection. So just by showing this, maybe you can use your own imagination to see how you can apply this to your own organization and make this suitable to your environment and maybe even skin it a little bit further. Right, so let's do a couple more demos because these are quite easy to do and we have some time. If you go to a web page that is quite long, for example, let's go to the how to use this wiki library. And it's not even the longest one, but when you start scrolling, you actually see the menu at the left-hand side scroll away from the screen. Now, it would be quite useful if the menu would be visible at all times, no matter how far or how far up or how far down you scroll down. So we've created an Infuser script for that as well, and let's add it to our site. And we call this the floating menus. And like the previous examples, this uses some JavaScript, in this case, and jQuery to attach an event to the scroll bars. So whenever the scroll bar of your website is moved, it automatically repositions the menu. And as you can see, it's not very long. It's fairly basic, and when you're a JavaScript or jQuery programmer, this stuff comes quite naturally. Okay, so let's save this. And let's go back to that page I showed you earlier in the wiki. And this is not specifically to the wiki, it's just any page that is longer than one page. So if we scroll down, you still see it go up the menu. But the moment it reaches the top of the screen, you see it stays there. So that is quite useful. So sometimes these pages go on and on and on. So now you don't have to go back. You just keep going around in your menu. So again, a very simple but quite useful example. And then let's do one final Infuser example before moving on to the next product. And this really shows how you can make the life of a SharePoint administrator a little bit easier. Because if you're an administrator or a power user like I am in SharePoint, then you need to access the site settings menu quite frequently. And that requires quite a few mouse clicks. You need to go to site actions, site settings, and then click around. If you have to do it a lot, it almost becomes annoying. So, of course, we can create a script to make it all easier. And let's attach it to a key combination. And again, this is a jQuery. So now, whenever we are anywhere on the site, really, and we want to go to the Site Actions menu, we no longer have to use the mouse. You just press Ctrl and S, and then it will automatically pop up Site Actions menu in a pop-up window. It's quite nice. You still see the rest of your environment behind it, but these are all the options that you normally see. So that really makes it easier and quicker to get access. So this is one of the scripts that we always have in our production environment, and our administrators just make it a little bit easier that way of moving around. Okay, so that's as far as our free SharePoint Infuser is concerned. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat window, and then I'll answer them at the end of the session. Okay, so let's move on to the URL shortener for SharePoint. And before I start with the overview, let's do a quick poll again to find out what your SharePoint environment looks like. So just bear with me for a second. I'll launch this poll. Should be on your screen now. So let's take 30 seconds so you can hopefully answer this question. Let's give it a couple more seconds. Okay, so it looks like most people have voted now. Thank you very much. I'll share the results. And as you can see, it's quite varied. Most of you have a single WSS3 SharePoint server, but quite a few people have more servers as well, even more than 3 servers, 16%. That's quite good. Okay, so let's go back to the URL shortener overview. And I'm sure that you're all familiar with those massive URLs that are created by SharePoint. There's just no easy way to quote one of these URLs over the phone. It's just not possible. Some are hundreds of characters long. And even emailing them may not work correctly in all email clients. Sometimes you see that the links are being truncated, and when someone clicks on it, it doesn't take them to the right page. So wouldn't it be much easier if you could just give someone 3 characters to type in, or give a URL a human readable name, such as reports, rather than something very long? Well, the SharePoint URL shortener has been created to solve this long URL problem, and it's not completely dissimilar from like these public services like tinyurl and Bitly and some other popular services that are used nowadays. However, our product integrates with SharePoint at a deep level, and also because it all is stored inside your own SharePoint environment, you don't really expose even your file names to the world outside, which you want to prevent. So the URL shortener makes it possible to easily share URLs, and shortened URLs, you can create them using a friendly user interface, or you can create them using workflows, or even from your own applications by calling into a web service that we expose. And it's a very lightweight solution. It's easy to install, configure, and operate, and it really doesn't require any extra servers or additional resources in your environment. So this is what it looks like if you use the standard user interface. And as you can see from the image at the top right, where I've used an actual standard SharePoint URL, it's not uncommon for a SharePoint URL to have 287 characters, or 300, or even more. And a shortened URL, it can be much shorter, and much actually depends on the DNS name that you give your server. But it can even be like one character. So you say /7, and then people know where to go, and it will actually turn that into the long URL in the background. So let's show a quick demo of how to create a short URL in SharePoint using the standard user interface. So let's say that this document library with the reports directory is a very popular directory that you want to send lots of people to, and people go to all the time. So it should really have a very simple URL. So what we say here is from the user's personal menu, you have an option that says shorten web address. And it automatically populates the address of the page that we were just on. And we can ask the system to create a short URL for us, and it just creates the shortest possible URL that's not being used yet, but that's not necessarily descriptive. So let's enter our own name for the short URL, and we'll call it reports. And we can even give it a description so you can later on see it again. And let's save this. Now, SharePoint at this moment stores in the background the fact that this new short URL is the same as this long one. So let's copy this to our clipboard so we can put it in an email or do whatever we like with it. Let's see what happens when we go to a new tab and someone would click on a link in an email. So we have the standard URL of our SharePoint environment and the report's name that we just gave it. So let's go there, and you'll see that the system automatically says, okay, well, the short URL that you've given it really is this long URL, and it automatically takes you there. So very simple, but very useful if you need it. Now that shows you how you can actually create a short URL for a page, but what if I want to point someone directly to a document? In this case, the board meeting. So it's such an important document. Let's make sure there's an easy name. So from the context menu of an item, you say shorten web address, and it automatically takes the address of the document, as you can see here. Now sometimes you want to link to the document directly, so when someone goes to the link, it opens it in MS Word. But sometimes you want actually to point the user to the display form, which shows some extra data about the document. So let's use that. And let's not give the URL a human readable name. Let the system decide what the shortest possible name is. Save this. And we'll see that the shortest name the system has is /3. So let's copy this address to the clipboard. And when we go to there, you see it doesn't actually open the document because we have to make the choice to not do that. And instead it takes you to this summary screen from where you can edit the item or delete it or check it out to do something else with it. So it's up to you to decide where the actual link goes to. Now, as you can see from the URL that's being generated, it's a lot shorter, but it's not necessarily the shortest because the default name of our development SharePoint environment is porthole.dev.muhimbi.local, which is quite long, and you would like to make that a little bit shorter. So what you can do, you can create an entry on your DNS server that's called something like go, and you point that to your server, and you configure SharePoint to actually listen on this very short name. So then you really can create short names, and you say, okay, just go to go/3, and that will bring you to the same link as well. So that really is a very short URL. So that was actually showing you how to create a URL by hand. But it's also possible to create short URLs as part of a workflow. And this allows more complex scenarios to be carried out where, for example, the short name is retrieved from an external source, such as a database, or someone fills out an info path form, and one of the fields is then used to actually create the short URL. So let's show how you can actually use this from a workflow. And I'll show this from the standard shared documents library. And for the sake of this example, we're going to specify the short name that can be used on a separate column in the list. But you can use your own imagination, and when this data comes from a list column, it can come from anywhere else. It's just the easiest to demonstrate. So let's create a column named short name. And we just accept the standard settings. And with this column created, let's create a new workflow in this case, in SharePoint Designer. And we give it a sensible name. And we connect it to the shared documents library. And we want this workflow to run whenever a new document is created or whenever the list item is being updated. Now, once you have the URL shortener installed, you have a new action which is called create short URL. Let's make the window a bit bigger so you can see what's going on. And you can either let the system generate a short name or you can specify your own. Now in this case, we'll actually take the value that may have been filled out in the new short URL or short name column I've just created. And we have to specify for which URL we actually have to shorten. So you can specify any web address that you either generate at runtime, or perhaps you want to do it on the current item, which makes a little bit more sense. So let's do a lookup on the ID of the current item. And then we can specify if we actually want to link to the document directly or to the display form. In this case, let's link to the document. And the shortened URL is returned in an output variable. So let's create a new one so we can actually reuse it in the rest of our workflow. Let's call it short URL, and the type is a string. And in our case, the only thing we really want to do with it is actually display it on screen. But in your case, you would use it for something else, or store it in a separate column, or make it part of the rest of your workflow process. So let's log it to the history list. And say the short URL output variable. So that's as far as the workflow is concerned. Let's finish this and save it. And let's edit the properties of this and specify a short name. Let's say we want to actually specify BM as the board meeting document. And let's save it. And once this has been saved, the workflow will become active in the background and carry out the actual work of shortening the URL of the item. So when we refresh the page, we'll see that I have made a mistake somewhere. Just bear with me, the workflow doesn't seem to trigger. No, it looks like it's decided to be difficult about this. Oh, this is very typical. Okay, let's restart SharePoint Designer. It looks like it hasn't attached the workflow to the document library. I'm sorry for this. I did a test earlier, and of course it all worked flawless, as always. Okay. It didn't actually save it because I forgot to specify one of the options. SharePoint is not to blame. It's my fault. Sorry for that. Let's save this again, and hopefully the workflow will now get started. Okay, so we see that the workflow is in progress. It's shortening the URL in the background. We can see it says completed. And we output the output of the short URL, and you can see that this new short URL is now being created, and you can do whatever you like with it. And in the real world, it would really be part of your new workflow, and you would do something with this. For example, make it part of an email that goes out to an end user so they can save the URL or click on it. Okay, if you look at the server requirements of this tool, it's similar to all our other products. It runs on any version of Windows that runs SharePoint. So server 2003, 2008, 32-bit, 64-bit, doesn't matter. The URL shortener at this moment is only available for SharePoint 2007 versions and WSS3. We're in the progress of moving this to SharePoint 2010. Supports all major browser versions. You don't really need any extra memory or CPU or disk space. It's all very tiny. It just works well and comes with all the documentation that you need to set it up and get up and running. We support a number of languages for the user interface, obviously English, Dutch because I'm Dutch, but also German and French and Chinese. And if you ever have a need to have any kind of language added, then just drop us a line. It's usually a matter of days that we can add a new language in, but we do it purely based on customer demand. So if you look at the available licenses, and all our products use the same licensing model, where if you have a single server license, because you only have one SharePoint server, then all you need is a single server license. In the case of this product, it's just $399, which is an absolute bargain. Now, if you have multiple licenses, it quickly becomes cheaper to just buy an enterprise license, which allows you to install the software on an unlimited number of machines in your enterprise. Now, OEM licenses are available for those people who want to bundle our products inside their own product, because maybe you have a larger application that you ship to customers, then you may want to have an OEM license. And you can even have a source code license just in case you really want to know what's going on under the hood, or if you want to make your own modifications. Then feel free to buy a source code license, which allows you to just make any changes you want in Visual Studio. So let's move on to the final product that I'll demonstrate today, which is the Workflow Power Pack for SharePoint. And this really is a great tool to make the life of the SharePoint designer workflow developers a lot easier. So before I start, let's do one final poll to find out how you are currently creating your workflows, if at all. So let me launch this poll. Should be on your screen now again. Let's give it about 30 seconds. Okay, it looks like most of you have voted. Let's close the poll and share the results. And as you can see here, today most people are actually using SharePoint Designer, which is great because all our products work with it. And those people that are using Visual Studio, which is a sizable amount, the easiest way to interact with our software from Visual Studio workflows is just to invoke the web services interface that ships with most of our products. And also we got some people that don't use any workflow, so I hope the next bit will still be interesting to you. Let's close the poll. And let's go on with the overview of the Workflow Power Pack. So although SharePoint Designer is a great tool to create workflows quick and easy, the workflow actions you get with it are very limited. And if you want to do anything remotely complex, then you need to fire up Visual Studio to create your own Visual Studio workflow or your own workflow actions just to address the shortcomings. And that makes the entire process way too complex for day-to-day workflow needs. So the Workflow Power Pack provides a great compromise between SharePoint Designer and Visual Studio. You can continue to use SharePoint Designer for creating workflows, but now you're able to directly add C# or VB.NET codes to your workflow. And basically that removes any kind of limitation of what you can do with the workflow. But as they say in Star Wars, with great power comes great responsibility. So administrators can control which .NET assemblies can be invoked from workflows. Otherwise, workflow developers would get free access to do anything they want on the entire server, and that's something you probably want to prevent. So providing administrators allow it, you can access any third-party assembly, including our products such as the PDF converter for SharePoint. And this allows really very complex scenarios. So this is the central administration screen that administrators can use to restrict access to a known list of .NET assemblies. And that basically is enough to make sure that people don't do things that they're not supposed to do. And as you can see here, this is an example of a workflow created in SharePoint Designer, and we've added a very little bit of very simple C# code directly to it. And I'll go through it in more detail in the next few demos. So let's move on to a very simple starter demo, and it filters out certain restricted words from file names. For example, in this example, we have a top secret project. It's called Project Flames. And we don't even want to disclose the project name in the file names. So we create a workflow to filter out the project name. Let's create a new workflow. Delete the old one. And we give it a sensible name. And we hook it up to the shared documents library, and we want it to run whenever something is created or updated. So we need to add a workflow condition to check the file name. Now the workflow conditions that come with SharePoint Designer make it very difficult to do partial string comparisons. So let's add some custom code to actually check what's going on inside the file name. And here's a little bit of script I've created earlier. And as you can see, it just looks at the item's name, checks if a certain word is being used in it, and if it is, it uses true, or otherwise it returns false. So once this condition executes, if it returns true, then it can actually run an action. Now again, with SharePoint Designer, there is no action out of the box that allows you to easily rename parts of a file name. So let's add the execute custom code, and this is written in C#. And let's add the code that I've created earlier. And again, this is very simple code. It replaces the word it's found in the item name, and then it says, let's update the item. So let's save this workflow, and now that we save it, it actually does a syntax check on all the codes that you've entered, and if there would have been any mistakes, it shows you a nice friendly list saying exactly what you've done wrong and what kind of syntax errors you may have introduced, and that you can actually fix it. So if we now go to our document library, and let's rename one of the files. And we're not thinking well today, so even though we've received the instructions from the management not to use the project name in file names, we do it anyway. So let's save the document with the new name. And initially, because we just saved it, you actually see it under the normal file name. Now the workflow is executing in the background and running the custom codes to execute the workflow action. And when we refresh the screen, we see it has already completed, and we see that this word we didn't want there has been taken out and been replaced by XXXX. And obviously you can take any action you want. You could even fire off an email saying that someone hasn't been listening when generating these file names. So let's move on to the next demonstration, which is for a very common requirement, which is to automatically synchronize two lists, and in this case calendars. And it is quite common that you want to merge data from one list into another. For example, multiple individual calendars may be present on your site, and you want to merge all that information that is in the individual calendars into one big team master calendar. So let's show how that works. Let's create two calendars. And the first one is the source calendar. Let's give it a sensible name. And let's create a team calendar as well, which is what we will be merging all the individual calendar entries into. Okay, so now we have these two calendars, and let's create a new workflow again. And we give it a sensible name. Sync calendars. And even though in this example we show it with calendars, basically this trick works with any list. You can have tasks, you can sync, whatever you want, you can do it. And we want this to act on the source calendar. So whenever something is being created or updated in there, we want this synchronization task to run. Now there's no conditions that we want to add, just an execute custom code condition. And we can actually pass parameters to this. And in this example, we'll specify the name of the destination calendar in here. It's called team calendar. Now the code that we're going to add actually has the ability to read the parameters that are being specified here, as well as access any other workflow parameters or parameters on the item. It makes it very simple. So let's copy our sync list code. And this is, as you can see, quite a longer example because there's just a little bit more work involved in synchronizing two lists and doing it in a reliable manner. So we've added the code to it. I'm not going into too much detail about the actual code. Let's just save the workflow, check it for syntax errors. And it's saved it correctly. So let's go to the source calendar. And let's create a new calendar entry. And today we have a webinar. Let's just type in the title. And we save it. And because a calendar is just a list like any other SharePoint list, it can have a workflow associated with it. So the workflow runs in the background and copies all the individual fields to the destination calendar. So if we now go to the team calendar, you'll see that it has created exactly the same item in there. And of course now I show it with one source calendar, but we could have 10 different source calendars, all with their workflow set up to copy it to the central team calendar. But let's make a change to the source calendar, to this one item we had, and actually check that it also synchronizes changes. And let's give it a description. And let's attach a file as well. Okay, let's save this. And because we have specified that the workflow also is invoked on changes of data, the workflow triggers again. And when we go to the team calendar, the destination one, we should see that the file now has been added, and so has the description. So as we're running a little bit out of time, I can't do any more demos, but we have quite a few more demos on our blog. For example, wants to send emails with attachments from a workflow, because the standard email task you get from Microsoft with SharePoint doesn't allow attachments. Samples to merge multiple PDF files into one file, or add watermarks to PDF files whenever a file is being updated. Connect to a SQL Server database from a workflow, or mirror folder structures. It's all available. And the Workflow Power Pack, we've recently released a SharePoint 2010 compatible version as well. So the Workflow Power Pack runs on SharePoint 2010, so SharePoint Server 2010, as well as SharePoint Foundation 2010, and of course SharePoint Designer 2010, as you can see in this screenshot. And like the other products, it basically runs on any SharePoint environment that comfortably runs SharePoint. There's no need to upgrade your servers for this tool. It all works fine. And we support English, Dutch, and traditional Chinese at the moment. And again, if you want to have your own languages added, just let us know, and we'll arrange for that. Licensing works exactly like our other products. It's just the prices are slightly the same. This product starts with a $499 server license, which is very affordable, especially when it solves many of your problems. So, right, that's all I wanted to show today. If you have any questions, then feel free to type it in the chat window. Just make clear which product you're asking the question about, otherwise I don't know. Or if you want to discuss your requirements in private, just send me an email and I'll make sure you get a quick answer to that. So please bear with me for a minute while I go through the list of questions. I see some have already arrived, and I'll see if I can answer the most common questions. So 1 second, please. I see a number of questions about Infuser, if that works with SharePoint 2010. Infuser is currently not working with SharePoint 2010, but that's something that we'll add in the next 1 or 2 months. It won't be a major operation, but we'll need to take some time to get it right and make sure it's properly tested. Then there's a question about the autocomplete for the search, what we are using for the data source for the suggestions. We're actually using the search web service that's underlying, that comes as part of SharePoint. So SharePoint actually ships with a number of web services to add items, to view items, but also to carry out searches. And there's one change you have to make if you want to run this script that we have on our website. With WSS, then the web service works slightly different from the one that ships with MOS. I believe there are some comments on our blog post that point people in the right direction. Then there's another question if this works with SharePoint Online. I'm not sure which product you are referring to, but the answer regarding is the same for all 3 products that we've discussed today, and that is, if you have a hosted SharePoint environment, then someone will need to install this software on the server. So if you have no access to it, then you will need to ask your hosting provider to install the software. Now, we work with quite a few hosting providers that actually allow this, and they do this, but depending on what kind of subscription you have with them, some of them may actually not allow this, and they want you to either get a more expensive subscription or they just don't allow any third-party software. So the answer is basically, it depends. So I don't see any other questions at the moment. So if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to send me an email directly, and I'll promise to follow it all up. So thank you very much for attending. The session has been recorded and it will be available for streaming on our blog in the next couple of days. So thanks again and have a nice day.